before we get to Kamala Harris's horoscope, I want to say that that the horoscope really confused me. But then I start looking at the chart. This is what you have to do if you want to really get to understand horoscopes. You have to say, what am I missing? What am I missing? How did she get this far? Why the 10th house ruler is in the 12th house in 0 degrees? How did she get so far? Before we get to Kamala Harris's horoscope, I want to say that that the horoscope really confused me when I first saw it. I looked at it and I said, "Oh my God, she has a terrible career house. The 10th house is terrible. The ruler of the 10th house is Jupiter. It's in the 12th house in it's in the first degree. It's weak because it's in 0 degrees of Taurus. It's retrograde. Retrograde does not mean afflicted. Retrograde means passive. So the 10th house ruler is passive because it's retrograde. So that means that early on in life, in the first 30 years, she wouldn't be thinking career, because it's passive. It's not so important. And Jupiter rules the 7th, which is marriage, and it's retrograde. So it's passive. But looking at the chart, which we'll put up in a minute, I said, my God, this is not a very strong 10th house, not strong at all. And so a friend of mine, he loves Kamala Harris, and he said, well, how did she get to be vice president? How did she get so far? And I said, it beats me. I don't know. But then I start looking at the chart. This is what you have to do if you want to really get to understand horoscopes. You have to say, what am I missing? What am I missing? How did she get this far? Why the 10th house ruler is in the 12th house in 0 degrees? How did she get so far? So you have to look, and you have to try to find, and you have to look where you're not used to looking. When you think about scientists who make discoveries, there's thousands of scientists looking to make a discovery. One person makes the discovery. The person who makes the discovery is looking somewhere that the other people are not looking. They're looking not at the obvious. They're looking for something hidden. And so you have to keep looking, and you have to keep saying, what am I missing? Not blaming the chart. The chart is wrong. It must be the chart is wrong. No, you have to say, what am I doing wrong in order to understand? I remember when I got my first computer program, I'd come back from India. I'd been back from India about, a year. And this was 1983. And I got a computer program. I didn't know anything about computers. I load the program. I can't get it working. That night, I was with a group of people, and they said, computer illiterate. I said, what do you mean? They said, you're computer illiterate. You don't know much about computers. The program's fine. You're the problem. I said, I'm the problem. Oh, I went home. Within 30 minutes, I had the program working. Why? Because I stopped blaming the program. I started saying, what am I doing wrong? So here's what I missed. When you look at this horoscope, it looks like Mars is in the 2nd house, fallen. It looks like Venus is in the 3rd house. However, that's using the ancient house system. And it's true. Mars is fallen in the 2nd house. It doesn't matter that the ascendant is 1 degree Gemini and Mars is 27 degrees. In the ancient system, Mars is in the 2nd house. It doesn't matter that Venus is in 24 degrees and the ascendant is 1 degree. Venus is in the 3rd house in the ancient system. However, eventually the astrologers came to realize if a planet is too far away from the ascendant degree, it's going to fall in 2 houses. So that's called the Bhava chart. So in the Bhava chart, you consider, this is an approximation. Listen carefully. They say you need to consider the ascendant as the middle of the house. So the ascendant is 1 degree Gemini. If the ascendant is the middle of the house, then 15 degrees past the 1 degree ascendant becomes the second house. But you don't have to go exact 15 degrees. It's an approximation. Approximately from 16 Taurus to 16 Gemini is the first house in the Bhava chart. Approximately 16 degrees Gemini to 16 Cancer is the second house. It's an approximation. So I teach in my classes that when you're looking at a horoscope, you must immediately look and see, is the ascendant very early or very late? If the ascendant's 10 degrees, 15 degrees, you don't have to worry about it. But if the ascendant's 1, 2, 5, 7, 8 degrees, if the ascendant's 25, 24, 25, 26, 27 degrees, you have to look to see, are there planets in 2 degrees and 3 degrees, and the ascendant's 27? They're going to fall in 2 houses.
Yeah.
Clients will say, wait a minute, how can Mars fall in 2 houses? How can a planet fall in 2 houses? Imagine that you plant a mango tree at the side, at the edge of your property. It's your tree. You get the mangoes, but you only get half the mangoes. Half the mangoes fall in the neighbor's yard. So now we see that Mars is in the second, but it's also in the third. When it's in the third, it's now aspecting Aquarius and Pisces, which is the 10th house. So now Mars is aspecting that 10th house. And Kamala Harris was a prosecutor. She would prosecute people, and she's a lawyer, and Mars has to do with law and being aggressive, etc. Then, more importantly, you see Venus at 24 degrees, and the ascendant is only 1 degree. So Venus is in the 3rd house, and Venus is in the 4th house. When Venus is in the 4th house, it aspects the 10th house. So now we have 2 very powerful, important planets, Venus and Mars, aspecting the 10th house. That is going to energize the 10th house tremendously. I have Venus, Mars in the 4th house. I have Rahu in the 10th, which is great. But the Venus-Mars in the 4th, aspecting my 10th, energizes it tremendously. So that's where a lot of that is coming from. Saturn, by nature, is a karaka of the 10th house. Now, if you look in the books, it's going to list many, many karakas. Like for the 7th house, Venus is the karaka of marriage. One planet, Venus alone, is the planet that connects to the marriage house. By nature, Venus is love, the 7th house is love. So Venus is the karaka of the marriage house. For the 10th house, the books are going to say the sun, the moon, Saturn, Mars. They're going to give 5 planets. That's ridiculous. The number 1 karaka for career is Saturn. Saturn is aspected by Venus, by Mars, by Rahu. Saturn is aspected by Venus, by Mars, by Rahu. And Saturn is in its own sign in the 9th house. It is very, very strong. That Saturn makes a person career-oriented. Regarding the Rahu in the 1st house, Rahu is very, very close to the ascendant. Very close. So everybody thinks, oh my God, Rahu and Ketu are terrible. Oh my God. Oh, my child has Rahu on the ascendant. Yeah, a lot of famous people have Rahu on the ascendant because Rahu is power, worldly power. It does not help the personality to have Rahu on the ascendant. The personality becomes egocentric. There's too much attention on the self. But Rahu is worldly power. It makes the person good looking. I don't know the Indians with Rahu in the 1st, but in America, John F. Kennedy Jr. was extremely good looking. Rahu on the ascendant. Dan Quayle, Rahu on the ascendant. Vice President Dan Quayle. John Lennon had Rahu on the ascendant, was not particularly good looking, but he had tremendous charisma. That's Rahu. So the Rahu in the 1st house is actually helping with her fame and recognition. When I first saw the horoscope, I said, yeah, it's a terrible 10th. I said, yeah, it's a terrible 10th house. It's not. The ruler of the 10th is not good. So it's in the 12th. Now, the 12th would be spiritual. And if you look at her career, a lot of the issues that she has worked on is helping poor people, helping people that have big problems, helping groups that have problems. That I think is connected to that 10th ruler in the 12th, raising consciousness, things like that. But what is phenomenal about the horoscope, clear as day, is the house of kingship, politics. I said, before I saw those aspects onto the 10th house, before I considered the 10th house Karaka Saturn, I said it's a terrible 10th house, but I was wrong. I wasn't looking long, and you have to keep looking and keep looking and keep looking. It takes days. I didn't get this for several days. But you look at the house of kingship. The sun is leadership. The sun is power. The sun is leadership. The sun, the strongest planet for politics, in my opinion, is the sun. It's confidence and power and leadership. There's other planets, Mars. All the presidents have very strong Mars, but the sun itself is power, and the 5th house is kingship. Beginning astrologers are going to think, oh, the sun has fallen. It's in Libra, 5th degree, and it is fallen. The sun is phenomenally powerful in this horoscope because it is aspected by the full moon. The sun is not aspected by the moon. It's aspected by the full moon, which is much more powerful. It is aspected by Mercury, which is the ruler of the ascendant and a wonderful planet. It's aspected by Mercury, it's conjunct Mercury within 4 degrees. It's aspected by a full moon within minutes. It's aspected by Rahu, worldly power, within 3 degrees. The sun is phenomenal, and its power and leadership, it's in the house of kingship. And the 5th house itself is very, very powerful because the moon and Mercury and Rahu aspect the 5th house. It's phenomenal. And then there's exchange of signs. The ruler of the 3rd house, the sun, is in the 5th. The ruler of the 5th house, Venus, is in the 3rd. So the 5th house and the 3rd house. Now, this is very artistic. The 3rd house and the 5th house are the arts, and Venus is in the house of the arts. So it is very creative and artistic, but it's also making that sun more powerful. It's helping a lot.
So then how do you consider the exchange of planets? Like Sun and Venus's exchange. There is an exchange between...
I just explained. The 3rd house and the 5th house exchange signs.
Yeah.
So the 3rd house is the arts and the 5th house are the arts. So the artistic creativity is going to be very strong. The 3rd house is the energy level. A person with a strong 3rd house is going to be very energetic. They're going to be very energetic, determined, strong-willed. So the willpower, because the 3rd house and the 5th house, the 5th house is Purva Punya, past life credit. And it's exchanging signs with the house of willpower, her determination and her willpower. You can give her a job that anybody else wouldn't want to do. She will finish it because the willpower is so strong, partly because of the Parivartana Yoga between 3 and 5. There's so many things that you can say about the exchange of signs between the 3rd house and the 5th house. It's going to be everything. It's going to be brothers and sisters. It's going to be willpower. If she wants to do public relations and advertising, to be very busy, to do lots of activities. Like if somebody asks me to write something for a magazine, I don't want to do it because it's so much work, and it's just going to be a magazine 1 month and then it's gone. I'm not good with doing all kinds of activity. But a person with a strong 3rd house like this, oh yes, can I write an article every day? Oh yes, I'll do it, and it'll be seen for a day, and then I'll do it again. I don't want to do that. I don't have a strong 3rd house. She does. Saturn aspects the 3rd house. Ketu aspects the 3rd house. That doesn't help with siblings. Saturn and Ketu, 2 malefics aspecting the 3rd house, is not helping with siblings. But as far as the 3rd house being energy, determination, the malefics aspecting the 3rd house will be good. And the exchange of signs will be very, very good. Part of the reason that I put this horoscope up was to see that planets will fall in 2 different houses. So that Venus, the 4th house ruler Mercury has some trouble being 4 degrees away from a fallen sun. Yes, it's aspected by the moon. Yes, it's aspected by Rahu, but Mercury is 4 degrees away from that fallen sun. Mercury's hurt, but Venus is also going to be in that 4th house, which is going to help tremendously. That is going to help. But I put this chart up so you can see Mars is in the 2nd house and the 3rd. And by the way, I have a very hard time listening to her speak. The 2nd house is speech, and Mercury is speech. Mercury is too afflicted by being near that fallen sun. It's protected by the moon a little bit, but it's still hurt. And the fallen Mars in the 2nd house, I cannot listen to that woman talk. She has a very nasal voice when she speaks, and I don't like it. That's coming from the fallen planet in the house of speaking, and the 4th house ruler is not so great. In any case, and that Mars, by the way, would have caused money problems. That is not Mars fallen in the 2nd house. That is Mars fallen in the worst degree of its fall. You have to memorize the sun is exalted in the 10th. You have to memorize the sun is exalted in the 10th degree of Aries, fallen in the 10th degree of Libra. Mars is exalted in the 28th degree of Cancer, exalted in the 28th degree of Capricorn. You have to know those degrees. So that is hurting the 2nd house. It's also going to hurt the 3rd house to some extent. So it would also hurt with siblings to some extent. But the 3rd house is phenomenally powerful because the 3rd house ruler's sun is so strong, aspected by a full moon and Mercury and exchanging signs with Venus. So even though the 3rd house is phenomenally strong, it's also got a serious problem from the Mars in the 3rd fallen. Now, astrology students will say, I don't get it. It's good and it's bad. It's good and it's bad. Well, what do you think life is? There's 8 billion people on the planet. A person doesn't just have all good 3rd house stuff or all bad 3rd house stuff or all bad marriage or all good marriage. It's mixed. It's mixed. And you have to figure out the 3rd house has many strong aspects and one really bad 3rd house feature. So the one really bad 3rd house feature is going to cause some serious problem. But on the whole, like she might not have any younger sibling because of that fallen Mars. Or the younger sibling might have, if she has one, might have one serious problem. At the same time, there would be a lot of good. You have to be able to figure this out for yourself. I can't tell it to you, each particular signification. You've got to be able to figure 3 good, 1 bad. 3 good, but 1 terrible. 3 bad, but 1 phenomenally good. 3 bad, but 1 pretty good. You have to be able to figure out what that means. That's your job. I also put this chart up because I wanted to explain again about the planetary aspects. I told you, you can go in the Hindu system, learn everything there, but if you want to be great, if you want these clients to walk out of the room going, I just had the best reading of my life. If you want to do that, you need to know a full page on Jupiter, Saturn with that other horoscope. You need to read a full page on the full moon, sun opposite moon. There's a full page on sun opposite moon. So I'll tell you some of it.
Right.
The sun opposite moon, the sun is masculine and the moon is feminine. So this person's masculine and feminine energies do not work well together. The person would sometimes be aggressive and masculine and sometimes be very sensitive and soft, but they don't blend very well. It's either or. More importantly, in most cases, not everyone, but 70%, if the masculine and feminine energies are opposite, it's not good. It means the mother, the moon, the father, the sun, were not harmonious at the time of conception. The mother and father could have been wonderful for the whole marriage, but at the time of conception, if a person has the moon opposite the sun, this tight, it is very likely they were in the middle of a fight and then they made love. Or they were mad at each other, and at the conception point, there was some disharmony. Not always, but 70%. This makes the person, Kamala, not having a good blended masculine, feminine energy. The ones that have the best are the people that have the sun conjunct the moon. Marlon Brando had the sun conjunct the moon. You watch his performances, he's very masculine, the sun. And then he suddenly becomes very tender, the moon. So the person with the sun conjunct the moon has access to strong confidence and access to feminine softness. Women love to be with a man who has the sun conjunct the moon. They can be strong and powerful and tender at the same time. This is why you have to read the aspects. You're not going to find this in the Hindu scriptures. The other thing about the sun opposite the moon, it's a very unfortunate feature for marriage. It's not terrible, but let me explain. Everything I'm telling you will work 70% of the time. Nothing works 100%. So the person with the sun, and let me say this. When I wrote these books, I didn't read half of what I'm telling you. I didn't read. I had horoscopes of people that I know. When I wrote my book on aspects, I had 20, 30, 50 horoscopes next to me of people, relatives, people that I know. And I'd look at the aspects and suddenly I would realize what was going on. That's the job of an astrologer, not just to read what people say and repeat it. So I came to find that people that have the sun opposite the moon had a very poor self-image in terms of confidence, self-image, self-love. The moon is the ability to love yourself. So it's the nurturing in childhood. So I've always said that when moon is conjunct Saturn, I've always said that the nurturing in childhood is not good. And in those first 7 years, the person feels a sense of poverty, not financial poverty, but they're not loved well. The early years are not good. And so, but it affects the whole life. They go through life not expecting to get their needs met. They go through life compromising, not feeling they deserve a good salary, not feeling they deserve good love, because the early years were so restrictive in the emotional sense. So the moon here is burned by the sun. It doesn't matter that the sun's aspecting its exaltation sign. It's good for the 11th house that the sun aspects its exaltation sign. It's not good for the moon. The moon is aspected by Ketu very tightly. The moon is aspected by the sun very tightly. But forget Ketu right now. The moon, when it's aspected by the sun, gets burned. And the person does not feel that they are lovable because there's a certain amount of love and nurturing that doesn't take place in the early years. So the person with the sun opposite the moon, I'm talking within 10 degrees, not 20 degrees, 25 degrees. In the Western system, aspects are actually only used within 8 or 10 degrees. They're not used beyond that. So I'm talking about the sun opposite moon within 10 degrees. But in this case, it's exact. It's within 1 degree.
Yes.
The person does not have self-acceptance. They do not love themselves. They do not have self-acceptance. Therefore, they go out and they get a partner that tries to change them. They fall in love with a person who says, you know, you need to change this. You know, I don't like this about you. I don't like that about you. And they stay with that person because they feel comfortable because they don't love themselves. Now, my horoscope has lots of problems, but that's not one of them. So if I'm dating someone and right away the person starts telling me to change, I wouldn't have another date. It's too unnatural. For me, it's like, what's going on here? But a person that has the sun opposite moon tightly, they say, yes, she's right. Yes, the partner's right. I'm no good. I need to change. I need to change. I need to change. So now you also could see from the fact that there's 2 planets opposite the moon. So that's going to affect marriage as well. Like Ketu is in the 7th house of this chart. So there'll be ups and downs in marriage, always something to talk about. I like the toothpaste this way. You like it that way. I like the window open. You like it closed. There'll always be something to work on. That's not a tragedy. That just means there's always something going on. But having the fallen sun opposite I should say 7 houses away from the moon, that's going to be problematic in married life. Even though Mercury's there, which is helping, having a fallen moon 7 houses away from that, having a fallen sun 7 houses away from that moon, she would have had some relationships with people that were bossy, strong-willed from the sun, but screwed up, bossy but fouled up somehow because of the fact that the sun is fallen.
There is an exchange between Moon and Mars also, no, sir?
Pardon me?
There's an exchange between Moon and Mars also in this chart.
That's good for money. That's good for money. Parivartana yoga. But it's not a great exchange because the Mars is fallen. It's not as good, not as good. But it might help with money. Now, where you see the lawyer prosecutor is the 9th house and Mars. The 9th house and Mars. Jupiter comes into play, not so much in this chart, but usually Mars, Jupiter, and the 9th house. So Mars aspects the 10th house. When you see it as being in the 3rd from the Bhava, it aspects the 10th. Mars aspects, so you got Saturn in its own sign in the 9th, which is the law. You have Mars aspecting the 9th house, which is the law, and the Saturn, which is the Karaka. And then you have the 9th house being very, very strong because it's aspected by 3 planets. It's aspected by Rahu. It's aspected by Mars. It's aspected by Venus. Saturn's in its own sign. It's very strong. And even when you see Mars as being in the 3rd house, Mars is both. It's in the 2nd and the 3rd. When you see Mars being in the 3rd, fallen in the 3rd, it's not good for the sibling, but it is still good for the mechanical, technical, and that Mars is a technical planet, and the technical planet is a planet of law. Law is a technical field like that. So the Dasha Bhukti that she is in right now, she is in the Rahu Venus Dasha Bhukti. And so the Rahu Venus, Rahu, I would say, is not a great dasha for the happiness of the personality level, but it's great for fame and recognition and power. And I like Rahu being in Mercury's sign. I think that's good. It's much better in Virgo, but I like it being in Gemini. And the Venus is the Yoga Karaka, so that's good. It's not, I don't see Venus as being particularly connected to the career, but it is it's a good bhukti, Rahu Venus. So
but Venus is aspecting the 10th house, no? Here.
Yeah. And not only is it aspecting it's not only aspecting the 10th house, it's aspecting Pisces, its exaltation sign. Now, the fact that Venus is running its bhukti has nothing to do with it aspecting the 10th house. Nothing. Okay. Planets do not. This is one of the questions that nobody could answer for me. It took me 40 years to figure it out. Planets that are running their dasha or bhukti do not throw aspects. And let me tell you how I figured it out. Because a lot of people will say, oh, it does throw an aspect. Venus is now throwing an aspect on the 9th and the 10th during its bhukti. No, here's why. Here's why. If you take a planet that is exalted and it's running its dasha, let's say that Venus is exalted in Pisces in the 10th house and it's running its dasha. So that's going to be great for the career, obviously. But you don't tell that person, oh, Venus exalted in the 10th, great for career, but terrible for home and mother because it's aspecting the 4th house. That's not going to happen. If you have Venus fallen in Virgo in the 4th house, you tell the person there's going to be troubles with land, homes, and real estate. You tell the person it's going to be great for wait, I got confused here. If
Venus is debilitated.
What was I saying? Venus? Was I saying
Venus
Venus
is fallen? Yeah.
Okay, so if Venus has fallen in if Venus has fallen in the fourth house, you're going to tell the person this is terrible for mother, terrible for land, homes, and real estate. But it's going to be fantastic for career because it's the Venus dasha and Venus is throwing an aspect onto the 10th house. No, that's never going to happen. So you have to get it out of your mind. Oh, the moon is in the 5th house, good for children, and you're running the moon dasha, and it's good for children, and it's aspecting the 11th. It'll be great for the friends and the groups. No, planets do not throw aspects in their dasha. They don't do it. That is that took me 40 years to figure out. Why? Because it's very hard to figure out. Because if you're running a dasha that's 6 years or 10 years or 16 years, there's going to be some times when the planet opposite that, the house opposite that planet, in those 6 years or 10 years, there's going to be some effects, good or bad. So it becomes very hard to figure out. But when you realize that you just look at an exalted planet, it doesn't hurt the fallen house. You look at the fallen planet, it doesn't help the.
Exactly.
It helps it natally. It helps it. Natally, it helps it. If Venus is fallen in Virgo, it's great for the house of Pisces. If Saturn is in Libra, it has some good effect for Libra, but it's natally it's terrible for the house it aspects, the 11th house. So I think that's enough. We spent an hour on these. I think that's,
Yes, sir. Literally, I could not see her getting such a great position in life. And now that you have explained, I realize about Mars and Venus. It took me
astrology, it turns out it takes a long time. It takes such a long time to figure these things out, but it's you have to know where to look. That's what I'm trying to teach in my classes. And that's why I keep going over the degrees, the tightness of the degrees, the Bhava chart. You cannot rectify a horoscope if you do not use the Bhava chart. It is impossible because planets will fall in 2 houses. So, but around October of this year, the 12 session class will be out, and then I'll move on to a second series of 12 classes. But these are the things, the degrees, and it's Padya, my teacher, told me you must have a computer mind. But along with the computer mind, you have to have the curiosity, and that's what Padya had. When I chose Padya as my teacher, I was in a room. I went. I was 1982. I went to see an astrologer. He called all the local astrologers to meet me. I said, what is this? They said, well, I called all the local astrologers because you're a Western astrologer. And one astrologer, Padya, took my chart. He said, let me see your chart. He says, you got married at 21 or 23. I said, that's the guy I want. He was curious. Not, oh, let's see what this astrologer said. Oh, let's see what that astrologer. That's not how it works. It's in my book, the Braha Sutras. Sutra number 8 is the most important sutra. It should have been number 1, but at the time I didn't realize. But it's the thinking mind. The thought process is the number 1 feature to be a great astrologer. It's not being able to learn all the scriptures and memorize what every astrologer has said. It's the thinking process that gets you there. And sometimes it takes 20 years and 30 years and 40 years. And I tell you what, all we're doing is scratching the surface. It's way too complex of a science. There's too many. There's 9 planets. There's 12 houses. There's 15 aspects. It's way too complicated. But if you have a horoscope for astrology, you become consumed with it and you can't help it.
So these classes that you have, 12 classes, these will be recorded sessions or you'll be taking it live with the students?
They are recorded sessions because I wanted to be able to do them, say everything I wanted to say, then be able to watch class 1 and make comments on class 1 in the next class to say, oh, I missed something, or I want you. They're like that. They are recorded sessions, and people can email me after they see them if they have questions. but it's I don't know. It's a fascinating. It is a fascinating process. And the funny thing is, when I started the first class, I had the feeling that my whole life had built up to this kind of teaching. People have wanted me to teach for decades, and I say, well, I teach through my books and such. And you have to go to those books and you have to memorize, but you also have to see an astrologer actually process the horoscope. You know, that helps. And what I did, and I tell the students in the classes, the way I did it, I studied with Santanam in 1982 from 7 o'clock to 11 o'clock at night, 4 hours a night. And then I had nothing to do all day, but I had a recorder with me. So I recorded the sessions. I listened to those recordings all day long. I wanted to memorize everything and learn everything that he had told me. And then a year and a half later, when I was with Padia, I was in Bombay. I remember I would go to the port. And then people would say, come and see the caves. Come and see the caves. I said, I'm not interested in the caves. I'm listening to, and the terrible thing is when I came back from India and I would see movies, Passage to India, and I would see the caves, I said, oh God, why didn't I go see the caves? But all day long, I simply wanted to be listening to the classes, listening and listening and listening. That's what I wanted to be doing.
Yes.
So the classes, you can watch them over and over and over because they are jam-packed with information.
Yes, sir.
When I'm doing horoscopes, I have to tell you, if I'm doing a reading for a person, I study the horoscope in the morning hours during breakfast. I do the chart 10 or 11 o'clock, sometimes in the afternoon. But I'm looking at the chart as I'm eating for the few hours, and I have to find the theme of the chart. If I'm not comfortable with the theme, I can't do it. I want to see the theme. But when I'm doing the chart, I look at all the little pieces, but I really only get about 50% of the pieces. I just can't get them all until I'm with the person doing the chart. And suddenly I start to see all sorts of pieces that I hadn't seen when I was working on the chart. It comes alive when the person is there, and I start to see all kinds of things that I didn't see before.